Hey friends, welcome back. This is season 2, the very first episode of Beyond the Numbers, the place in the podcast where we're redefining what healthy ministry actually looks like. You know, ministry is filled with lots of changes, lots of shifts, and a lot of times, whether it's planned out or not, one of those biggest shifts comes with your staff team. Pastors come and go. Staff changes in and out, roles shift around, seasons end and new chapters begin. But what happens when transitions go wrong? When pastors, leaders, and staff are erased? When comparison starts to take root within us and those around us? When the very people that we're called to shepherd and lead become divided and confused and broken because of the way that we handled the change? Today, I want to talk about a subject that's not only deeply personal for me and through my experiences, but also over season 1, many of the people that you reached out to me and talked to me, this was one of the main areas where there was a lot of hurt, a lot of angst, a lot of fear, a lot of baggage that was left behind or carried through into next jobs, because there are many of us that have experienced transitions that just went crazy. So what could health look like instead when it comes to transitioning in or out of new positions? Because if we're supposed to be shepherds, then why do so many transitions and changes within ministry feel like corporate takeovers? We're diving in, we're going deep. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers. Before we dive in, I just want to encourage you, if you haven't yet, do me a favor and subscribe so that you can see these videos as they come out in real time. Also, if you haven't yet, as you watch these, if it hits home, like it, share it with someone else, do a favor and leave a comment. The more you do those things, the more these videos reach out to other people so other people can see and hear what health really looks like within churches. Now, diving in, I have been through my share of the good, the bad, and the ugly style transitions. I've stepped into roles where the transition was awful. I've stepped out of roles where the transition was chaotic and messy and damaging. Some were beautiful and some left deep, deep scars within me and within others. I've had moments where, like, from day one, it felt like a competition. Like, I would sit down with other people and all they would do is share with me everything that my predecessor did wrong and how they want things to be different. And I'm not talking just about staff. I'm talking about students. I'm talking about leaders. I'm talking about congregation members. Or then there's the opposite side, which isn't what they did wrong, but everything they did right, and comparing me to that person right off the bat. They'd sit there and tell me stories all nostalgically about how, well, they had hundreds of students that came out on a weekly basis. I don't know why you're having such a hard time bringing in students. Oh, I remember where they had a service where they had 75 students and 100 got saved. And I'm sitting there trying to do the math, and the math ain't mathing for me. But, you know, and then looking back at the numbers, you find out, well, they didn't have 100, they had 25. It's funny how nostalgia kind of tints the way that we look at things. There were also times where I walked into ministries and I was told, no, you can't talk to your predecessor. You can't talk to the people that had the role before you. Even 4 youth pastors or 4 leaders before you. You can't talk to them. Why? Because we're a secret society. No, we're not a secret society, but it was treated that way. And in the process, those leaders and the history that they had and the connections they had with the students were erased. We're acting like and pretending like they didn't actually exist. And can I tell you, when you're in the face of that silence, all it does is breed confusion. Because what ends up happening is you end up fighting against a culture, a history, even sometimes a hurt that you didn't even know existed. Now, transitioning in can be one thing, but sometimes when you leave, even in the best situations, there can be such hurt and emotions tied to it. And if we're not careful, and if leaders aren't careful, their emotions can just run away with them. I've had transitions where I honored the process. gave notice way ahead of time to make sure that we could have a smooth transition, so that in this role, no leaders, no students, no other ministry people felt like I was letting go of all the weight and leaving it all on them. And so I tried to make sure that I had a transition plan in place to help. And yet, even in spite of that process, there was hurt and there was emotions that just got so wrapped up into it. What ended up happening was I was attacked, I was mocked, I was made fun of. I even had them question my calling, all because they were hurt. And this was done privately, but it was also to a degree done publicly. In some of those cases, I found out weeks later, if not months or even sometimes years later, that in the process of that emotional hurt that those leaders felt, they went and started gossiping about me, spreading lies or rumors or just making up things to hurt me and to change the view of those that once worked with me or I once worked with. I've also had it where I was erased. No, I mean like literally erased, like within 24 hours, not any moral failing or spiritual failing. It was just, I don't exist anymore. Any visual representation, any comments about me, anything like that, it was just, we're not talking about him. He's gone. Like we were in the USSR. No trace I was ever there. And can I tell you, in those moments, do you know, while it hurts you as a leader, do you know who it hurts more? Those that we shepherded. Because what you're doing isn't just ending a leader. You're cutting off a part of their legacy, a part of their history, for some of them, a part of their salvation story. And so the damage goes much deeper than a leader being hurt. We can start to cause issues with people's walk in the way that they view God. Many of them, those leaders and students that I worked with, they were left confused. They were left divided. All because the people that were called to shepherd them, they didn't model what a healthy transition looks like. So I started asking myself, is there a better way? And what's amazing is that this was a topic and a subject and a hurt that was echoed through many of you that private messaged me and on different social media platforms commented and added different things about how you were part of transitions that just went wrong. And I realized that there was a deeper root and a deeper problem that really needs to be addressed if we want to see our churches, our ministries become healthier. What if transitions didn't have to hurt people or wound them, but actually instead reflected the heart of the gospel, which is restoration and not rivalry? If you ever watched like an Olympic relay, you see the runners, of course, run around in their giant circle, oval, whatever that shape is, but they're carrying a baton. And when they hit a certain point where they're coming up to their partner, they have to make sure that that transition is smooth, or else the baton is dropped. There's a stumble with the handoff. The person running trips and falls or falls off a track or whatever. The transition needs to be smooth. And the problem is that with many of our churches and many of our leadership cultures, we handle transition like a corporate rebrand and not a spiritual handoff. We see it all the time. We see incoming leaders that feel like they have to make the mark, and they feel that pressure within themselves or sometimes within the actual congregation. I have to leave my mark. I gotta change things up. I gotta shift things around. You also see outgoing leaders sometimes that feel like they're forgotten or erased. And then you have congregations that we often see when they go through these periods of transition and change. You see people fall away from the church. People visit others. People feel like they're hurt. There's confusion and division a lot of times, especially when they're left out of the conversation. And in the end, transitions become more about the optics and not obedience, or more like the imagery and we forget the integrity. But this isn't a new concept. If you go all the way back to the New Testament, you see that Paul actually addressed this within the church themselves, dealing with the same tension that sometimes we face now. In 1 Corinthians 3, people are already talking. They're like, well, I follow Paul. And others are going, well, I follow Apollos. And there's this clash and almost division because of these two leaders. They're comparing which leader is better and which one it's better to be discipled or baptized under. They're making ministry about personalities rather than the purpose. And Paul picks it up and addresses it. He says, what is Apollos? What is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe. I planted the seed. Apollos watered it. But God has been making it grow. That's it. Paul refused to compete. He refused to get into this whole comparison game. He understood ministry isn't about who gets the credit. It's about the one that receives the glory. But in so many of our modern church and ministry settings, we've flipped that around. We've instead focused on branding, visibility, and the public narrative. And in the process, those that we were called to shepherd instead become an audience. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? What does a healthy transition look like? As we were working last year, one of the pastors that I was interviewing, in our time off camera, we were chatting about ministry, and he shared what his transition process looked like. And I was blown away. I was like, man, if I had experienced a transition process like that, I don't think I would have had some of the baggage that I had. I don't think I would have had some of the hurt. And I don't think it would have taken time for the students or those that we're ministering to find some healing and some restoration, because it was a smooth transition that honored God and honored the congregation. That's the way that we should be approaching this. I think that a healthy transition honors the people and the process. I mean, if we're going to lead, then we have to lead well. That means if you're an outgoing leader, be prepared to bless. Don't just be like, I'm handing off the keys and I'm taking off. It's kind of like, you sell a car and then you kind of cross the fingers that they drive the car away before they realize everything that's wrong with it. Outgoing leaders, we got to be better than that. We gotta bless them as they go out. Sure, there may be different baggage that we walked away with. Sure, there might be that problematic parent or two. But in all honesty, we need to care about those that we're ministering to and those that were our flock at one point so much that we want to pray and bless their new leader as you step away so that they continue to grow in their walk. Don't just hand off the keys, hand off your heart. I can tell you one of the hardest things, but something that sometimes is a benefit, is if that transition is happening while you're there, celebrate that new incoming leader. I'm talking about you leaving. Sometimes that comparison can take so much of a root that we're afraid that other people will like that person better. Celebrate that person. Share good things about the person. Encourage the congregation to continue to be tied in, to continue to listen, to continue to come out and support this person. Now, if you're an incoming leader, can I tell you one of the biggest things that I've seen and learned? Take this as a really good tip. Depending on what situation it is you're walking into, healthy leadership and healthy transition looks like learning the people and the culture before leading them. Now, I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean sit back and just let things happen for a year. But sometimes we're so quick to take the charge that all we do is run over people rather than actually learn about them. And can I tell you the biggest thing that I've seen with this? The changing of the name. Do you know how many youth ministry roles I've stepped into and they're like, are you going to change our name again? Because that's one of the first things that as a next gen leader, sometimes we try to do. We try to come in and leave our own mark and just change everything up. Day one, first thing that needs to happen. Not the message I'm teaching or my introduction. No, we need to change the name. No, you don't. In a lot of the interviews That's what I would start to talk with these places about, the idea that I'm not coming in to change things to Josh's style. I want to learn the culture, and if there are things that need to be fixed, we're going to fix them. But I want to make sure that we're not forgetting about the legacy and the history that's there. And the last several places that I've worked for, we have never changed the name. Why? Because that's just a minor thing that when you do it, you change the history of the program and the history of those that have gotten saved within it and the people that have grown up through it. And do you know what? That name and that ministry is bigger than me. And so I don't need to get in there and immediately try to change everything. You're stepping into someone else's legacy. You're stepping into others' prayers that they have prayed for this church, this ministry, this congregation for decades, if not centuries. Remember that. And for churches and boards, and I realize every church government is going to be set up differently. But when transition happens, try to make it the healthiest thing. I would say first and foremost, that health looks like communication being transparent. Again, we're not trying to sell a used car. These are the hearts, souls, and minds of those who Jesus loves and others love. So don't let fear or image management try to drive the process. Don't try to hide things. If there were situations, if there were issues that happened, discuss them. I realize there are different levels of NDAs and all that kind of stuff. But to a degree, share what you can so that those that are stepping in have an understanding, a true understanding and grasp about it. And if you can't share it, let them know you can't share it. Can I tell you, people respect honesty more than polished silence. And this is so important for us to realize, because when we handle transition with humility, we show the world what spiritual maturity really looks like. And I think in this time and day, there's a lot that we need to show and make up for. We also show them that legacy isn't about recognition. More than anything, legacy is about reproduction. I've told my students, I've told my leaders, I've told those that I've ministered to for years and years and years, I have failed in my job as a pastor if when I leave, your walk falls apart. If when I leave, you want nothing to do with God or Christianity and you never get plugged in again, because all I've done is built the entire ministry on my personality rather than being an arrow that points to Christ. Legacy isn't about your name being remembered by those people forever and ever and ever. It's about people being shepherded and continuing to be shepherded and growing in their walk long after you're gone. So what are some action steps that we can start taking today to make sure that we are handling this transition process well? For churches and boards, I know it's something kind of somber to think about, but have a transition plan in place. Even if your leaders never leave, have a transition plan in place so that you're not completely caught off guard, so you have something to fall back on. So you're not just reacting to situations, but you're like, okay, we didn't want this to happen, but we kind of have a plan in place already to make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible. In some cases, can I tell you, one of the best things to do, if possible, is to have there be some type of overlap. So again, it's like that relay where the baton is actually handed off instead of laying the baton down and then a year or two later, someone else picking up that baton. I realize for every leader, it's going to be a little different, and for every situation, it's going to be different. But when possible, have that transition happen together where maybe there's a season where both leaders are actually working together. And the biggest thing is to protect truth, not image. I know we don't want our church's image destroyed, but we got to make sure that we are speaking truth and making sure that those coming in and leaving are being honored, cared for, and not met with silence and lies. For incoming leaders, If you're stepping into a ministry, what are some action steps that you can take today as you step in? Identify what's right. What are the things within the ministry, within your teams, within your leaders, within your staff that is working great? Identify it and celebrate it. Most of the time when these transitions happen, it's what's wrong and criticizing and pointing out all the different things, and all we do is cutting the ground out from underneath other people. There could be a lot wrong, but let's start by celebrating what's right. And then from there, start building relationships first and foremost instead of strategies. Yes, it's good to step in with a plan, but sometimes we're so focused on the plan that we don't work on building relationships with the very people that we're supposed to be ministering to and the flock that we're supposed to be shepherding. And one of the biggest things for incoming leaders is don't tear down overnight what you didn't build. Now, I realize in some situations we come in and everything is chaotic and everything is a mess, and we have to make some changes. When I was interviewing with different churches, I always approached it from a house point of view, meaning, working on a house. And I would say, okay, is the ministry that I'm stepping into, are you looking for does it need just like a little paint job, like a little room touch up? Is the ministry kind of like we need to, do an addition to a house, or maybe kind of, revamp it a little bit, tear down the kitchen and then kind of rebuild the kitchen? There's some things that we got to work on. There's some things that we got to change. Or are we talking like this house burnt down, there's nothing left, and we are reconstructing it from the ground up? And I would approach that situation so I knew what I was stepping into. So they would share it with me, and I realized, okay, they're not looking for huge changes right now because everything is very healthy within the church, within the ministry. And so because of that, I can come in and just focus on these things right away. Sometimes we're stepping into something that is so healthy that all they need is just another leader to care for the people, and we step in and trying to make our mark, we just tear everything down and try to rebuild it in our image instead of God's image. For outgoing leaders, leave blessings, not bitterness. Even in the churches that I have left and felt hurt with, I've made it a point, unless there were ethical and moral things that were going on there that needed to be addressed, and doing it in the right means and the right way, I wouldn't tear down those churches. I wouldn't tear down those leaders. I would do my best to bless and pray for those leaders, but especially if it were students, if it were adults, whatever the congregation is that I was leaving, I would make sure that I would pray for them, especially that they would continue to grow. Because when we let that bitterness take root, we make it more about us than about them. Instead, choose to speak life over that ministry that you're releasing. And then in some cases, there can be that fear of what will happen to these people once I'm gone. And with that, there's a level of trust that you need to put within God to know that He loves them more than you do. He cares for them more than you do. They are His children, and He will sustain them long after you're gone. I won't pretend like when it comes to transitions that they don't leave scars. They do. I won't pretend like those scars didn't happen to me, because they did. But as we shared all the way back in the first season, when I talked about the pains that I have been through, and as God has allowed me to do through this podcast, God has a way of redeeming even the most painful chapters of your life and of your story. And what I've learned is, even if people cut you off, even if people cut down your legacy, God never does. The same God who planted you for one season will replant you for another. And sometimes for many of us, that clean break that you didn't plan on becomes the soil for your next calling. So if you've been hurt by a ministry transition, if you felt erased, forgotten about, discarded, misunderstood, or just left in the dark, please hear me when I say this. Your story isn't over. Your value didn't change the minute you left that position. And God still has fruit to grow from the seeds that you planted, even if we may never see that fruit on this side of eternity. Remember what Paul said. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So maybe that's our new transition model. Less competition, more cooperation. Less fear, more faith. Less branding, and instead more shepherding. Hey, if this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear your story. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. You can even leave a message in the comment. I'd love to chat with you and hear what God has brought you through, and maybe you have a testimony, or maybe you need some prayer through these processes. Whether you're stepping into a new season or trying to heal from an old one. Remember this, you're not alone. There is a better way to do these transitions. In fact, later on this week, we'll have a special Voices from the Field where I bring back a pastor that I talked with last season. In the process, he shared with me what his transition looked like. And can I tell you, I was just blown away with how their transition worked and how healthy the handoff was. And in the end, both pastors are better for it. And their congregation is not only growing deeper, but it's growing wider because of the way that they honored God and honored the process. We're just starting off this new season, and we're starting it off in a big way. You don't want to miss a single episode, including next week's, where we're going to dive into the topic of toxic loyalty and manipulation within the church. When faithfulness becomes control. Yeah, we're not pulling any punches, and we're going to dive in and start off strong and continue on with this and many more great topics. As always, if this episode resonated with you, do me a favor and like, comment, share it with someone that you feel like they could really use this. The more we do that, the more this reaches out to other pastors and other leaders who need to see and hear these tips and these advice, and most importantly, these stories to find healing. Until then, I'm Josh, and this is Beyond the Numbers, helping leaders redefine what healthy ministry really looks like. Thanks.